One of the most common questions I get from sellers is this: how much is this actually going to cost me? Not the list price, not what the house sells for, but what you really walk away with at the end. And most sellers are surprised by the answer, not because the costs are hidden, but because no one ever lays them out clearly ahead of time. So today, I want to walk you through what it really costs to sell a home, where sellers tend to underestimate expenses, and how to avoid getting blindsided at the closing table. Hello, welcome to Real Estate Simplified. I'm Bill Simmons, realtor with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, ambassador real estate. Real talk, real advice, real estate simplified. Let's start with the biggest misconception sellers have. Most people think selling costs are just about commission. That's it. That's the number they focus on. But commission is just only one piece of the equation. What really matters is your net, what you walk away with after everything is said and done. And that's where sellers get caught off guard. Let me say this clearly before we go any further. There is nothing wrong with wanting to maximize your profit. There's nothing wrong with asking questions about costs. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with wanting transparency. In fact, the sellers who do the best are the ones who understand the full picture early, not the ones who avoid the conversation. Let's talk about commission, because that's always the elephant in the room. Yes, there's a cost to professional representation. And yes, that cost pays for more than just putting your home on the MLS. It covers marketing, exposure, negotiation, transaction management, and risk reduction, and guidance through one of the largest financial decisions you'll ever make. But here's what most sellers miss. Commission is predictable. The surprises usually come from everything else. Seller closing costs are one of the first areas people underestimate. Depending on your location, these can include title fees, escrow fees, recording fees, and sometimes transfer taxes. Individually, none of these look scary, but together they add up. And if you haven't sold a home in a long time or ever, these costs feel like they came out of nowhere, even though they're standard. This is why I always encourage sellers to look at a net sheet early, not to scare you, but to prepare you, because prepared sellers make better decisions. Another area sellers often forget to budget for is concessions. In today's market, buyers often ask for help with closing costs, repairs, or credits after inspection. That doesn't mean you did anything wrong, it's just part of how negotiations work. And here's the part that matters. A $10,000 concession is the same as a $10,000 price reduction. It affects your bottom line the same way. But emotionally, sellers tend to think of concessions as separate until they see the final number. Now let's talk about pre-listing costs. This is where sellers either set themselves up for success or struggle later. Homes don't need to be perfect to sell, but they do need to be presentable. Sometimes that means cleaning. Sometimes that means paint. Sometimes that means fixing small issues that you've learned to ignore. And sometimes it means doing nothing at all. The key is strategy, not over-improving. The goal is not to remodel your house for the next owner. The goal is to remove objections for buyers. And that usually costs far less than people fear, especially when done intentionally. Here's something sellers rarely consider until it's too late: inspection-related costs. Even well-maintained homes have inspection findings. That's normal. The issue isn't whether things come up, it's how they're handled. Sometimes the buyer asks for repairs, sometimes they ask for a credit, and sometimes they ask for both. And sometimes the seller agrees, because it keeps the deal together. Those costs are part of selling, not a failure. The sellers who struggle the most are the ones who assume inspection means perfection. It means negotiation, and another hidden cost is time. Days on the market matter. Every extra week a home sits unsold increases carrying costs. Mortgage payments, taxes, insurance, utilities, and beyond money. It increases stress. That's why pricing and preparation matter so much. A home that sells quickly often nets more, even if the price isn't the highest on day one. Let's talk about the difference between price and net, because this is where sellers make emotional decisions. A higher offer with more concessions can net less than a slightly lower offer with cleaner terms. That's why I never evaluate offers based on price alone. I evaluate the full financial outcome, because what you keep matters more than what looks good on paper. Here's another cost sellers don't expect: appraisal gaps. If a buyer's loan requires an appraisal and the home doesn't appraise, someone has to make up that difference. Sometimes that's the buyer, sometimes it's the seller. Sometimes the deal falls apart. Understanding appraisal risk ahead of time helps you choose better offers, not just higher ones. Let's pause for a second. This is important. None of these costs mean selling isn't worth it. They don't mean the system is broken. They don't mean you're being taken advantage of. They mean selling a home is a financial decision with moving parts. And the sellers who come out the happiest are the ones who understand those parts early. One of the biggest mistakes I see is sellers focusing on avoiding costs instead of managing them. Trying to avoid everything often leads to worse outcomes. Trying to plan for them leads to better ones. That's a big difference. This is why online estimates can be misleading. They talk about value, but not net. They don't account for concessions, prep, timelines, or negotiations. They give you a number, not a strategy. And strategy is what protects your bottom line. When I sit down with a seller, my goal isn't to sell you a dream number. My goal is to show you reality and then help you beat it. That means knowing where costs are likely to show up and planning accordingly. That's how you avoid stress. That's how you avoid surprises. That's how you stay in control. If you're thinking about selling, the best thing you can do is get clarity early. Not estimates, not guesses, actual numbers. That's what allows you to decide whether now is the right time and how to approach the market if it is. If you're thinking about selling and would like a free home valuation, a comparative market analysis, or instant access to one of my books, just click the link to my website. You'll see options for What's My Home Worth or Free Book. And if you'd rather talk, feel free to reach out directly. I'm always happy to help. If this video helped you, hit the thumbs up and subscribe for more local real estate insight and practical advice. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.